Alistar is one of the best scaling supports in the game, who, once he hits level 16, will undoubtedly be the most tanky support in the game, especially in team fights, as his ultimate will basically negate most damage that you can pile onto him. In the laning phase and in other parts of the game, he also sports fantastic CC, as well as a good heal that scales very well, and will also allow him to provide a lot of sustain for his AD carry. Every time Alistar casts one of his abilities, he will be able to ignore unit collision and will move through units dealing magic damage to them. This also applies to structures. This magic damage does scale with levels and also ability power. Please note that Trample does deal double damage to minions and monsters. Alistar's Q is Pulverize. Alistar will smash his fist into the ground and knock up all nearby enemies. This will knock them up for 1 second and will stun them upon landing for 0.5 of a second. Due to the decreasing cooldowns in this spell, I take it at level 1, however I only max it by level 13. Alistar's W is Headbutt. Alistar will dash to an enemy's position and ram them, dealing magic damage and knocking them back a further distance. This deals magic damage, of course, and again its cooldown does decrease per level. I tend to take this at level 2, however I max it last by level 18. Alistar's E is Triumphant Roar. Alistar will instantly heal himself and all nearby friendly units, both champions and minions, for half of that amount. Please note that the cooldown on this ability is reduced by 2 seconds each time an enemy unit dies. This will scale with AP, however Alistar is obviously not that based on APs, based on tankiness, and as a result this is really only useful in the early game. Because of this I take this at level 3, however I max it first by level 9. If you want to go for a more CC heavy Alistar, you can go for Pulverize, then Headbutt, then Triumphant Roar, as opposed to my original format. However, this will sacrifice a lot of sustain in lane. Alistar's ultimate is Unbreakable Will. Alistar will instantly gain bonus attack damage and will take reduced physical and magic damage for 7 seconds. If he is under crowd control effects, he will break these initial effects at the time of casting. The bonus magic damage will basically allow him to deal ridiculous amounts of damage for support, and the damage reduction will just make him one of the most tanky supports in the game. Basically, as an Alistar, if you have that ultimate in a team fight, you want to be focused. You probably won't die, and the enemy team will die pretty much instantly because of the fact that they are focusing the support. As an ultimate, of course, I take this at levels 6, 11, and 16. In the early game, ganks are your main opportunity to really shine as Alistar. Here I see Jax moving in from the bottom river and sitting in the brush. I decide to move through to this brush here, and Galio decides to try and attack Ashe. He overextends and I headbutt him backwards and then pulverize the ground around him. Together we kill Galio and I accidentally pick up the kill. However, as you can see here, Alistar is fantastically good at punishing those champions that stray from their AD carry or support, making him fantastic in the laning phase, when coupled of course with his sustain. Later on in the game, as my team is pushing mid, I decide to move into the enemy jungle. Galio follows me, then turns back, seeing that Jax, I think, he does know that Jax is in that jungle, so waiting for Jax, I start on the wolves and we attempt to steal them. Everything seems to be going fine, however, everything goes off at this stage as LeBlanc comes in. Jax gets put down very low. I use my ult to get out of Galio's ult. Jax is killed. Zyra uses her ult and picks up the kill on LeBlanc. I then focus Varus and kill him. I'm very tanky at this stage. I try and keep the enemy team off Zyra by pushing back Shyvana. She uses her ult. We pick up the kill on Galio. Zyra managed to get away a bit further, however, Shyvana does pick up the kill on Zyra. At this point, though, Shyvana will definitely die. We managed to kill Shyvana, leaving only Malphite, who was at base originally, alive. And then, as you can see here, Malphite decides that he's had enough of this bullshit, and I knock him back into the Ashe arrow, and we pick up the ace. If you're wondering why he did that, basically have a look at the chat, and you will see that Varus is not what you would call a sporting player. And after this point, it is pretty much GG, as we have AC enemy team, and take their tower as a result. Towards the end of the game, we're moving towards Dragon. The Varus arrow comes in. He then uses his volley. LeBlanc comes in, so obviously I pulverize her, then manage to headbutt her into the Ashe arrow. She flashes away, and I manage to flash behind her to pick up the kill. Notice here how I managed to defend my AD carry in a very bad position.
So a good use of CC, map awareness, and of course a little bit of healing goes a long way.
When looking at runes for Alistar, I tend to go for 9 flat AD marks, or AD per level if you want that late game advantage as opposed to early game advantage. You can also take your 6 flat armor seals, your 3 mana regen per level seals, and your 9 magic resist per level glyphs. Of course, there will also be the 3 gold per 10-second quintessences, as this is Alistar, he is a support, and therefore requires more money for wards, oracles, etc, etc. This general build will just allow me to have the good tankiness I need, and at late game magic resist is always welcome. Also, the flat AD gives me actually quite high damage early in the game. However, if you're say going someone like Corki or one of those champions like Kog'Maw that doesn't really start off very strong but really scales incredibly well into late game, then of course AD per level is probably more advantageous to you. When looking at masteries for Alistar, I tend to go for an 8-1-21 setup or a 9-0-21 setup. If I'm going for the 8-1-21, of course I'll grab the increased summoner heal in defense, and of course that will mean I've taken increased summoner heal. However, if the AD carry has taken summoner heal himself, which is generally the case, I tend to go for the 9-0-21. I will of course get everything that gives me cooldown reduction, giving me a massive 10% cooldown reduction at the start of the game. I will of course also take the increased gold per 10 seconds, however not the increased starting gold. I do not consider it to be worth it. I take the increased vision wards, the increased experience, and of course the increased summoner cooldown. This will of course allow me to have more exhaust per game than I would otherwise, and will give me the extra money and experience that I so desperately need as a support. When looking at summoner spells for Alistar, I tend to go for either Flash Exhaust or Exhaust CV, depending on how good the enemy team will be. If you're below about 1000 elo, you do not need to take CV. Counter warding will not occur unless you're playing against me. If however you are playing at a higher elo level and you are facing a team that will counter ward, CV is basically essential, and to be honest, Flash isn't really applicable for you, as you don't really need it unless you want to do a Flash Q combo. Exhaust is far more important for of course, because it will just completely wreck the AD carry's damage output. If you really are desperate for a summoner heal, you may take it. Ditto with the Ignite as well. However, I find that people who take those on basically any support tend not to do as well, as Exhaust just does so much damage to an enemy AD carry's damage output. When looking at item builds for Alistar, I tend to open up with a Fairy Charm, 3 Sight Wards, a Health Pot, and a Mana Pot. This will basically give me quite a lot of sustain in lane, and of course give me those wards that I desperately need as a support. I then go back and take a Philosopher's Stone and a Heart of Gold. This will obviously be my GP10 items and will give me a nice amount of money. I then go for Aegis of Legion because of course it has that badass aura that gives your team that massive amount of tankiness and a little bit of increased damage output as well. I will then go for a Frozen Heart, as this gives me again a massively overpowered aura that just wrecks the enemy's total damage output, well at least their physical damage output, that is. It also gives me some much needed tankiness, some CD reduction, and some mana, which will allow me to spam more abilities and keep my mana at the same time. Then I will of course go for Shirelia's Reverie, as this is basically one of those items that you kind of need as a support because it has that amazing active that can give you that great chasing power or escaping power. And finally I will upgrade my Heart of Gold into Randuit's Omen. This of course has that badass aura when you have the active aura, I mean. However, it also has the ridiculous passive as well, which basically means that if you flash in, put in a pulverize, everyone starts sort of panicking and attacking you, they will suffer big time force and their damage output will just slump. If you're looking for a final item, which I do not recommend because I like to keep a place free for things like wards, you can probably get a Trinity Force. However, if you're desperate for a lot of increased damage output, you can even go for an Atlas Impaler. However, I would always recommend you just keep buying elixirs and oracles and just general awarding things, as I like to keep that spare item slot free. You have been watching the Alistar Support Champion Spotlight produced by the FF Gamers Group. I've been SSJ, your host for this video, and I hope you comment, rate and subscribe to this video and of course our channel. Please feel free to look at the rest of our network, I hope you do. And of course I hope you tell me what you think about my build and what you would change, what you would have as your own build, and I will probably be able to get back to you. So until next episode, this is goodbye from me.